She dislocated her shoulder, a dislocated shoulder, just minutes before the competition that would decide the Olympic team on the 20th of December, 2025 during the pair short program at the Japan Figure Skating Championships. Something shocking happened during the 6-minute warm-up. Right before a throw jump, Riku Miura suddenly lost her balance. In the very next moment, her left shoulder came out of place. It was a dislocation. With only minutes left before the performance, the world didn't stop inside the arena. It stopped inside Ryuichi Kihara himself. Later, he would say these words, "I thought my heart stopped." Read that again slowly. When athletes talk about an injured partner, they usually speak like professionals first. They talk about the competition, the strategy, the impact on the team. That's the normal response. But Ryui chose different words. "I thought my heart stopped." Those are not strategic words. They are not calculated words. They are the kind of words that escape from someone instinctively when the person in front of them means everything. Music, and today, that is the story we're talking about. Last week on this channel, we talked about the tiny kitchen the two shared for 7 years in Oakville. Before that, we talked about the early morning drives, the quiet nights eating curry and omelets, and the dark winter mornings spent on the road together. Those were stories about ordinary days nobody ever saw. But today's story is different because in a single moment, all of that ordinary life was shaken. And at the center of it all was one sentence Ryui could not stop himself from saying. To understand why, we need to go back a little further. This was not the first time Riku's left shoulder had failed her. The first dislocation happened back in July 2022 during an ice show before the season had even officially begun. Instead of preparing normally for competition, she spent months focused on treatment and rehabilitation. The two could not even practice together again until September. And yet somehow after returning, they won Skate Canada International, then captured the Grand Prix final, the Four Continents Figure Skating Championships, and finally the World Figure Skating Championships. It became the first Grand Slam season ever achieved by a Japanese pair team. But behind all of those historic victories, her shoulder never truly healed. The pain never completely disappeared. For years, Riku continued competing while carrying that injury. Silently and together they stayed at the top of the world. Then 3 years passed. The 20th of December, 2025, the Japanese National Championships. This was not just another domestic event. It was the competition connected directly to Olympic selection for the 2026 Winter Olympics. Everything they had built over 7 years came down to this one performance. And then during the 6-minute practice, it happened again. Right before the throw jump, Riku lost control. Her left shoulder dislocated once more. The exact same shoulder. The same injury she had carried for years. Suddenly gave out again only minutes before the most important performance of their careers. Now imagine where Ryui was standing when it happened. He was right there beside her on the ice. A throw jump is a pair element. He is the one who throws her into the air, which means Ryuichi was the closest person in the entire arena when her shoulder came out. "I thought my heart stopped." Those words did not come during the performance itself. He said them afterward in an interview, but there is no doubt that exact feeling rushed through him in that moment. Your heart stops, your body freezes, your mind goes blank, and right in front of you is the person who matters most, trying to endure unbearable pain. When someone witnesses a moment like that, what do they think first? Do they think about the competition, or do they think about losing the person standing beside them? Of course, people can explain it simply as concern between longtime partners, a natural reaction from someone who has fought alongside the same teammate for years. That explanation is completely possible, but in Japanese, the phrase, "I thought my heart stopped," carries a very deep emotional weight. Most athletes would say, "I was surprised" or "I was worried." But "my heart stopped" is different. That expression is usually reserved for moments involving someone so important that their pain feels connected to your own survival. Music, like hearing terrible news about your child or watching someone precious suffer right in front of you. What exactly Ryui meant when he chose those words? Perhaps we should leave that for viewers to decide themselves. At ringside, trainers rushed in and performed emergency treatment. They carefully put the shoulder back into place while Riku quietly endured the pain. And then she made a decision. I'm going to compete only minutes after dislocating her shoulder. From a normal perspective, it sounded incredibly dangerous. Anyone familiar with para skating understands why. There are lifts, there are throw jumps, She is launched high into the air, rotating before landing, and every single movement depends heavily on the shoulders. And she was about to do all of it with a shoulder that had just come out of place. But Riku decided to skate. And then came another important decision, Ryui's decision. When Riku said she wanted to continue, he did not stop her. He did not say it was too dangerous. He did not tell her to withdraw. Why was it? Because he respected her determination, or because after 7 years together, there was simply no longer a version of this journey where one continued without the other. Even after saying, "I thought my heart stopped," Ryuichi stepped onto the ice beside her. He lifted her. He threw her into the air. He caught her. Normally, those movements are built on trust. But on that day, every movement felt more like a prayer. Then the music began. They skated and somehow something unbelievable happened. They scored 84.91 points, a score nearly matching their season's best. Just minutes after a shoulder dislocation, they delivered one of the strongest performances of the entire season. For anyone who understands figure skating even a little, that should sound impossible. Under normal circumstances, a performance like that should not even exist. Under normal circumstances, it should have been impossible. But somehow, they made it happen. The moment the performance ended, Ryuichi Kihara looked toward Riku Miura. The cameras never captured what he said or even what he was thinking, but they did capture his expression. It was a face filled with something difficult to describe. Relief, emotion, disbelief, maybe something even deeper than that. 3 years earlier, during the first shoulder dislocation in 2022, Riku had also chosen to compete. And back then, Ryui supported her the same way. But this time was different. According to reports from Yomiuri Shimbun, unlike the incident 3 years earlier, Ryuichi did not allow his panic to affect the performance. Back in 2022, his emotions had clearly appeared in the skating itself. But in December 2025, it was different. The fear was still there. The shock was still there. A level of fear so intense he later described it as my heart stopping. And yet, he kept it hidden. Why? The answer was probably built over 7 long years together. 3 years earlier, they still had not fully learned how to face moments like this. But after that came years of shared routines. Endless mornings driving together, quiet dinners every night, hundreds of training sessions, injuries, exhaustion, victories, failures. All of it slowly shaped Ryuichi into someone capable of hiding his fear in order to protect the person beside him. Even if his heart felt like it was stopping inside, outwardly he remained steady for Riku. And learning how to do that took years. Honestly, this feels like something deeper than sports. It feels like growth as a human being. When someone you care about gets hurt, your own panic can make them even more afraid. So, you learn to suppress your emotions for their sake. But that is not a skill people master overnight. It comes from repeated pain, repeated mistakes, repeated moments where you fail before finally learning how to stay calm. 3 years earlier, Ryui could not minutes fully control that fear. His emotions showed during the performance, but by 2025, he had overcome it. Even while feeling like his heart might stop, he still held himself together and supported Riku completely. And somewhere inside that change, you can clearly see the weight of 7 years together. After the competition ended, the two returned to their hotel that night. What happened there? Nobody truly knows. From this point on, everything becomes imagination. But one thing feels certain. Riku's shoulder was probably still in terrible pain. Even though trainers had forced it back into place, the tissue around the joint would already have been inflamed. Every movement likely hurt. So, what was Ryuichi doing that night? Think back to the stories we talked about before. For 7 years, he kept cooking curry for her. For 7 years, he kept picking her up every morning. When someone is tired, when someone is in pain, what kind of person is Ryui? At this point, I think we already know the answer. In that hotel room, he probably did what he had always done. He likely brought ice to help cool her shoulder, helped her take pain medication, checked on the injury one more time before bed, made sure everything was ready for the next morning. Just imagine that scene for a second. Is that simply kindness from a senior teammate, or is it something much harder to explain? The same man who said, "I thought my heart stopped," stood calmly on the ice earlier that day, pretending everything was fine. And somehow there feels like there's something inside that moment words cannot fully describe. Something even bigger than leave it to your imagination. And Riku saw all of it from closer than anyone else. The 20th of December, 2025, Japanese National Championships. 84.91 points. After the competition ended, media outlets everywhere reported how unbelievable that score was. Experts called it a miracle that the pair managed to skate at that level immediately after a shoulder dislocation. But Ryuichi and Riku themselves never called it a miracle. Their words were quiet. Riku simply said, "Ryuichi supported me." And Ryui answered, "Riku never gave up." They praised each other. Neither talked about themselves. Even the phrase, "I thought my heart stopped," only came out after reporters kept pressing him with questions. Maybe there were things he truly wanted to say. But the two of them never say those things publicly. That familiar distance between them remained intact once again. Leave it to your imagination. And yet, back in the hotel room that night, there were probably more honest conversations happening, where nobody else could hear. Maybe it was just a short exchange. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." Or maybe it was silence. A long silence shared between two people who already understood everything without needing words. We can't know. And once again, all we can do is imagine. But one thing is undeniable. The two people sitting in that hotel room in 2025 were completely different from the pair who faced the first dislocation back in July 2022. At that time, they had only been living in Canada for 3 years. Their life together in Oakville still wasn't fully formed yet. They were still learning how to carry each other's pain, still learning how to respond to each other's fear, still learning how to truly become two people moving as one. That is why Ryui's emotions leaked into the performance 3 years earlier. It was not weakness. It simply meant they were still becoming who they are now. But by December 2025, they had changed. The fear itself was probably exactly the same. Ryui almost certainly felt the same heart-topping panic he felt 3 years earlier. What changed was how he handled it. 3 years of early morning drives, 3 years of shared kitchens, countless practices, countless competitions. All of it gave Ryuichi a new strength. The ability to hide his fear for the sake of the person beside him. And it gave Riku something new as well. The ability to completely trust the man standing beside her, even when he showed no fear at all. In the end, they won. They scored 84.91 points. And after the new year began, they were officially selected to represent Japan at the 2026 Winter Olympics. But there's one more thing worth thinking about. Ryuichi publicly said, "I thought my heart stopped after the December 2025 competition." But surely that feeling had existed long before then. Back in July 2022 during the first shoulder dislocation, didn't he probably feel the exact same thing? Most likely, yes. He just never said it publicly. And then in April 2023, it was Ryui himself who was diagnosed with lumbar spondylosis. At that moment, what do you think Riku felt? She probably experienced the same terrifying sensation. The person beside her suddenly unable to compete. The moment she heard about his back injury, her heart probably stopped, too. But she never used those words. Instead, she said something else. If Ryui isn't here, then being a pair team has no meaning. Now place those two statements side by side. "I thought my heart stopped. Without him, pair skating has no meaning." And suddenly something becomes very clear. When these two talk about losing each other, they no longer sound like ordinary athletes speaking about competition. They weren't talking about competition anymore, not about scores, not about winning. The words they chose were far more physical, far more instinctive. "My heart stopped. There's no meaning without him." These are not the words athletes normally use when discussing results. These are the words people use when they are talking about someone whose existence has become part of their own. Now look at the timeline carefully. July 2022, Riku Miura suffers her first shoulder dislocation. 2023, Ryuichi Kihara is diagnosed with lumbar spondylosis. Music, December 2025, Riku suffers her second shoulder dislocation, yet the pair scores 84.91 points. February 2026. At the 2026 Winter Olympics, they score 158.13 points and win gold. April 2026. Minutes retirement is announced alongside the words, "Thank you for these 7 years." May 2026. A message appears saying, "Meeting each other was destiny." When you step back and look at that timeline, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Both of them experienced the fear of almost losing the other. When Riku was injured, Ryui supported her. When Ryui was injured, Riku waited for him. The roles changed, but the experience remained the same. Both of them learned what it felt like to stand on the edge of losing the person beside them. And experiences like that change people. Very few paraskaters in the world have gone through that many moments of fear together. When those experiences pile up year after year, something strange begins to happen. You become afraid of imagining a world without that person in it. At the retirement press conference in April 2026, Riku said something unforgettable. When Ryui retires, I will retire too. I would never continue with another partner. Otaku that have thought about those words for a long time. I would never. Such a strong refusal. Most athletes in their 20s do not speak that way. Usually, they leave possibilities open. I haven't thought about it yet. I'm not sure. Maybe that is the safer answer. But Riku didn't hesitate. She said never. Why? Probably because she can no longer imagine skating in a world where Ryui is not beside her. Or perhaps she simply does not want to imagine it. The feeling behind her 2023 statement, there is no meaning without him, and her 2026 statement, I would never skate with anyone else, are fundamentally the same emotion. After living through those painful months without him, continuing pair skating with someone else stopped being an option in her heart. And the same was true for Ryui. For years, he watched Riku fight through injuries from closer than anyone else. The first shoulder dislocation in 2022, the second dislocation in December 2025, and all the months in between, where she continued skating despite never fully healing. He saw all of it. He said, I thought my heart stopped. And yet, when Riku decided to compete anyway, he stepped onto the ice beside her. He lifted her, threw her, caught her, supported her. After living through 7 years like that together, perhaps the idea of skating with anyone else no longer existed for him either. That is why the two of them reached the same decision at the same time. Let Milan be the end. Retirement only made sense if they did it together. And now I want you to remember something. In the previous videos about the kitchen and the daily car rides, we kept asking the same question over and over. Was this simply kindness between senior and junior teammates, or was it something more? Each time we stopped ourselves and said, leave it to your imagination. But after hearing the words, I thought my heart stopped. It suddenly feels impossible to keep asking that question the same way. Because athletes normally do not describe a teammate's injury by saying, their heart stopped. They say, they were surprised. They say they were worried. But my heart stopped is the kind of phrase that escapes unconsciously when someone precious to minutes your own existence is in danger. And the fact those words came from Ryui's mouth tells us something important to him. Riku is that kind of person. Whether people call that love, family, soulmates, or something else entirely does not really matter. The label is not the important part. What matters is this. Ryui sees someone in Riku whose loss would feel like losing part of himself. And Riku seems to see the same thing in him. The world may choose many different names for that kind of bond, but whenever people ask, the two of them always give the same answer. Leave it to your imagination. Then on the 1st of May 2026, only 2 weeks after announcing retirement, the two stood side by side on the ice once again during the blue ice performance in Hyogo Prefecture. Ryui lifted Riku into the air. It became the final lift of their competitive career. And in that moment, his hands once again supported the same left shoulder that had suffered pain for years. The same shoulder that had dislocated again and again. Fans around the world watched silently. And many of them were probably remembering December 2025, the competition where a man said, I thought my heart stopped, music, and still chose to throw and catch his partner on the ice. Anyone watching that final lift in May 2026 was seeing more than just choreography. They were seeing 7 years of trust. For 7 years, Ryuichi supported Riku. And perhaps he always will. Even if the shape of that support changes with time. And somewhere inside all of it, those words will probably remain forever. I thought my heart stopped. Before ending this video, there is one important thing I want to say clearly. Everything discussed today comes from publicly available interviews, press conferences, and media reports. The quotes from Ryui and Riku are real statements. The events are real events, and the phrase I thought my heart stopped was directly reported by multiple media outlets including Yomiuri Shimbun. But at the same time, we should also be honest about something. In this video, We deeply interpreted the meaning behind those words. We repeatedly asked whether those words sounded like the language of lovers or, perhaps, family. And by asking those questions, we inevitably create a certain emotional impression for viewers. That much should be acknowledged openly. But this channel is not trying to prove that the two are dating, nor are we trying to prove that they are not. We cannot know the truth. And honestly, it is not our place to decide it. The only people who truly understand their relationship are the two of them. And as long as they continue saying, "Leave it to your imagination," we should respect that answer, because the real story here is not romance. The real story is the emotional weight of repeatedly almost losing each other over 7 years. The 2022 shoulder dislocation, the 2023 back injury, the second dislocation in December 2025. Again and again, the two stood on the edge of losing one another. And from those experiences came the words, "My heart stopped. There's no meaning without him. I would never skate with another partner." No matter what kind of relationship they truly have, those words remain real. And their story did not end when competition ended. It continues quietly now in new forms, through projects like Destiny, through dreams like the Riku Ryu Academy, and through the life they continue building after skating. As fans, perhaps, the best thing we can do is simply watch warmly from a distance. We are allowed to support them, but we are not entitled to define them. So, if after watching this video, you still find yourself asking, what exactly are they to each other? Then maybe the best answer is the same one Riku herself always gives. Leave it to your imagination. But hopefully that imagination is a warm one. An imagination filled with the kindness of the man who said, "I thought." My heart stopped, and the strength of the woman who still chose to step onto the ice beside him. And above all else, I hope their new journey is peaceful and happy. And if today's story stayed with you even a little, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And in the comments, I'd really love to know how minutes did you personally interpret the words, "I thought my heart stopped." Your warm messages are what keep this channel